We need to have a political strategy to affect change. And the numbers right now are really bad. 65-35 is a pretty tough starting point. What do we have to do?
Well, as I was alluding to earlier, we've got to start forcing the NRA and other gun advocates to start fighting the fight in California. I've had the ability to speak with some of the highest echelons of the NRA and the National Shooting Sports Foundation and some of the others, and they are very excited about their wins in Texas or their wins in Ohio. But that's like mending a broken leg versus attacking cancer. And I always use the analogy of cancer because what's going on in California is starting to be the template that other anti-gun states like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts are all starting to follow. And now, even North Carolina is starting to we're starting to see more and more of that on the capacity issues. So we all, as members of the NRA, members of whatever group that you're in, call them up, say, what are you doing to fight out here? Well, we're participating in this one little law, this one little lawsuit for the roster, or we're helping with this. They got to get more involved. We need to have a lot of money come into the state. We all need to contribute that $25, $50, $100 when those emails come out to the Cow Guns foundations and the other foundations that are out there. We've got to contribute. It's the only way that these laws, one, are going to be filed, these lawsuits are going to be filed, and we're going to get these moving. They're going to have to go through the Supreme Court. We cannot assume that anything is going to be won in the state of California, nor in the Ninth Circuit of Appeals. One thing, I had an audit done recently we bring people in to even do fake audits to try and keep us legal and help us. And this gentleman just retired from the California Department of Justice. He's actually on our side. He said that California Department of Justice is the most sued agency in the state of California. They lose the most lawsuits as well. The problem is you and I don't have $50,000 or $100,000, nor do we want to spend time in jail and have handcuffs on us waiting to see if we're going to win that lawsuit. We need to have advocates out there pushing for us. Michael Schwartz, his group, they're the voice up to these other advocates. We need to support them monetarily and on the phone. Write the letters.
And I would go one step further. I completely agree on all of that. Not just tell the NRA, hey, please pay attention to California. They hear that. They have their own bias in terms of their own thought process. I say follow the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rule. Give only to organizations that are exclusively focused on California. That's how we're going to get this done. Because NRA is still taking a whole bunch of money, and they do good work nationally. But if we want to change California, we got to be fully resourced here. Other thoughts on political change in terms of kicking this off?
The biggest misconception to me out of everything we've discussed today and everything we're going to discuss today, the biggest misconception is that California is anti-gun. California's politicians are by and large anti-gun, but if you were to ask just your average citizen, what do you think the most popular state is with firearms? Probably most people would say Texas. And I was looking up some studies, and different sources place California gun ownership by household. On the low end, 5% of households in California own firearms, and as high as 35% of households in California own firearms. ConcealedNation.org did a study last year where they cited the population of California was 37 million, and that the state of California owns 33 million guns that we know of, and which puts us roughly equal to China in firearms ownership. That also puts California #1 in the United States in gun ownership, if that study is correct, #2 being Texas. Those studies all may be flawed. Who knows where they got their numbers? Does it deal with registration? Does it deal not? But again, as a competition shooter, the biggest competition shooting organization is USPSA, the United States Practical Shooters Association. USPSA has 25,000 members nationwide. Texas is the #2 state for membership in USPSA with 1,800 members. California is #1 in the United States with members in the USPSA with 2,400 members. Roughly 10% of the total USPSA membership is in California, and we are 26% higher than the #2 state, which is Texas. I know the firearms sales manager of the Bass Pro Shops up in Rancho Cucamonga. For Bass Pro Shops, Texas is #1 in firearm sales. The Bass Pro Shops location in Dallas, Texas is the #1 in the country for firearm sales. The #2 Bass Pro Shops in the entire United States for firearm sales is the one in Rancho Cucamonga. So California is very pro-gun. Last summer, we had everybody called it Gunmageddon with all this new stuff coming out. We had the petitions that went around, and we were trying really hard to get all the petitions signed. What was the number that we needed?
About
You
400,000.
need about
About 400,000.
400,000.
Okay. We have roughly enough firearms owners just in the county of San Diego that we could have carried the petitions and only needed that number of signatures statewide to get them through, and he failed. So Ryan Peterson wrote a great article. I'm going to read a little excerpt from it that I think hits this point right on the head. Said, if we learned one lesson from, Ryan Peterson, by the way, is the owner of Gunfighter Tactical in Miramar, said, if we learned one lesson from the Gunmageddon experience is that we are simply the most utterly disorganized group of people in the history of political movements. Political change does not come from well-meaning, but from disorganized individuals. Political change comes from passionate, well-organized, and vocal groups of like-minded people who work together as a team to accomplish a common goal. We did not work well as a team in this veto effort, and that's why we lost. Our lack of organization is understandable to some extent. Those on the left side of the political spectrum organize well, in large part because they believe heavily in collectivism and groupthink. It just comes naturally to them. Libertarian and right side of the political spectrum is made up of rugged individualists. We pride ourselves on individualism, and we reject groupthink and dependence on others. We have jobs, we have families. We just want our government to leave us alone, so we go home, we crawl into our caves and ignore the outside world. By our nature, we just simply don't organize well, and that has to change.
Yeah. Other thoughts on the political change movement? We'll get into the specific strategy, but in general, what you think needs to change here?
I just wanted to reiterate, and I was going to say, you put it so eloquently already, it really does matter. And I know sometimes we get discouraged with our state legislature and we feel like it doesn't matter. And I've had a few people ask me just very recently, do I believe that California has hit a point of no return? Meaning, is it too late? Is there anything left that we can do on any level for a lot of the issues that face the state? And as an elected official myself, I have to tell you, your voice does matter to us. And I was going to reiterate that we have to come together as one voice. We do have some legislators in Sacramento who are fighting for us and who do hear us, but they need to know that we're behind them, because sometimes it's a little bit lonely up there in Sacramento for them. And we have to do a better job coming together with one loud, solid, and powerful block. And I think that's really important. And it's organizations like San Diego County Gun Owners, the NRA, the CRP. It's organizations like that we need to get involved in. And like it was said, put our money where our mouth is, because we need to not only be engaged in ourselves, but we need to get those around us engaged. We need to have those conversations and let people know what the issues are and how we can affect them. And for like some of the propositions that have been passed that we want to talk about, it was asked, how do we rectify those? Well, a proposition, a vote of the people, has to be amended or repealed only by another vote of the people. So that's a lot of education and that's a lot of information. And so that takes a lot of engagement. And I think it's just really important that if you take nothing away from today, that's the most important thing. Be informed, be engaged, and be vocal.
Other thoughts on the political movement?
Yeah, you can clap for that. Yeah. One of the most important things I think we need to do is probably one of the harder things that we need to do, and that's change the way we talk and think about our issue. This is 100% truly a civil rights issue. And it's not just about, okay, well, do we have a tool that we can hunt a deer with or go to the range with, or, man, that's a really cool, accessory. That's not really what the Second Amendment is about, and we need to change the mentality and the reason that we fight for it. Truly, this is a civil rights issue, and which is backed up by not just the Supreme Court, but by the reality and history. This is the way that we protect ourselves. This is the way that we protect our dignity and our families. You know, this is a very patriotic issue. It's the way that we may have to protect our countries and our neighborhoods, that sort of thing. I think far too often we fall back on statistics and we fall, you know, back on, well, gee, if I just come up with a really good explanation for, you know, and show them the logic behind it. But I think that we really need to bring out the emotional side of this. You know, for most of human history, the biggest, strongest, meanest guy in the village got to do whatever he wanted, right? It's only been about the last 150 years or so with the invention of the firearm that, you know, a 90-pound disabled woman could defend her life and her dignity against an MMA weightlifting Navy SEAL. Truly. And if you think about that, what an amazing slice of history we live in. You know, this last just 150 years that we're equal to everybody else out there. You know, what a luxury, what a privilege. And that's the angle that I think that we really need to bring out more of. And I think that that's what you have to tap into when you're talking about this. You know, we certainly need to stay away from, you know, insults and throwing our hands up in the air. And we need to talk about, well, you know, gee, are these laws fair? And are you truly caring about the people that they're supposed to govern? Or is it unfair and does it leave people vulnerable? Because, you know, I think most of the people in the room today and most of the people that I talk to that are members or activists do this because they truly care about people. And I think that's the path to victory.
Well, Carl, I think one form of activism that everybody in this room can take or can do is it's not just about pontificating and trying to educate verbally. Take someone shooting. Introduce people to firearms. The story is, you know, as an instructor, I cannot tell you how fun it is to have a woman come in who is shaking. She shakes your hand and it's dripping with perspiration because she's so nervous. We have them walk in and they literally stop at the door listening for the gunshots because they're so scared to be there. And then they step in a little bit further. By taking somebody and introducing them to firearms, Michael does this with his group in a wonderful way. They bring people in, they have coaches. We introduce them, they walk out, they stand taller, they give you big old hugs, and now you've just got one more person in our camp. It's not as scary as the news made it out to be. It's not as you know, they're not evil. They're not gonna, if I touch it, it's not gonna hurt me. So that's a part of activism that's fun, just introducing people to the shooting sports.
I got to dovetail with what Jamie said. I get people calling in to the show all the time saying, you know, what do we do about these protesters? What do we do about the fact that there's a boycott against this company here because they said something nice about the Second Amendment or the First Amendment? I said, well, look, we are not good. We're not as good at this game as some folks on the left. We've got, you know, a whole cottage industry of activists on the left who, as you pointed out, they like the collective. They work as a collective. We're more individualistic. We see protesters and we're saying, we disagree with you, but I'm a supporter of free speech. So if you want to act like an idiot in the middle of the street, by all means. We also have jobs. We're busy, and it's not like we can take off and do protest after protest after protest. And, you know, so we're really bad at this stuff. You know, commercial boycotts, if we don't like what a company's done, we might actually say, I don't like your politics, but I really love your yogurt. I really love it. The one time the left did not succeed was when they protested Chick-fil-A over their moral values. Look, gay guys saying that they're not going to go have a fatty chicken sandwich, that's not a threat. We know you don't eat Chick-fil-A sandwiches. If you said that you're boycotting a Cosmo bar, fine. But we don't do protests very well, and we don't do boycotts very well for all those reasons that you identified. But we've got to learn. We've got to do it. And so I would put things into three buckets. We have to educate, we have to litigate, and we have to initiate. On educate, it's what you just said. One form of education is finding an individual and saying, hey, let me teach you what proper firearm handling is all about. Come to the shooting range. That's you educating one-on-one. But we have to demand that our organizations do far better communications and public relations on the Second Amendment. We've got to reposition, reframe this issue. I don't know if you've seen this online, but on Facebook and some of the other social media platforms, millennials love taking quizzes. Have you ever taken a quiz on Facebook? Find out what sort of voter you are, and you take your quiz. Or which candidate is your quiz? Take the quiz. Are you really a psychopath? Take the quiz. And everyone takes the quiz. And then they post the results, and it becomes something that's viral. I would love it to have a quiz that says, are you a felon? Are you a felon? And the quiz would be all the various California gun laws. And if you get one wrong and you immediately go to a page that says, you are a felon, you no longer have freedom, and this is what your politicians have created in the state of California. And if you think that it's unreasonable, what you've just been asked that you did not know, then maybe you need to reconsider what some of these proposals are all about. And we need better advertising out there. We need the viral videos where you have the domestic violence victim who sits there and looks straight into camera and she tells her story about how she was frightened that her abusive husband was going to come back and do something to her or the kids. And that because of the Second Amendment, she sleeps a little better at night. We have to do the education using the tactics of our opponents. Now, litigate, that's just tactical, okay? There's some bad laws out there that we need to litigate. We got Sheriff Gore, obviously, that case hopefully goes to the Supreme Court. The wonderful thing about litigation in this case is that because we have such a clear right in the Second Amendment, and hopefully when we get a fully benched Supreme Court, we have a Supreme Court that's generally agreeable to freedom. The litigation strategy should be able to help us out. But then we also have to take that third step, which is initiate. And there's two forms of initiation. Number one, we have to stop playing defense. We're going to lose every time. They are putting title and summary for their ballot measure out that says, kittens and puppies, vote here. And you're like, that's so biased in terms of how you're describing this. But they're the ones that put it on the ballot. So we have to do our own drill. We have to put our own initiatives on the ballot. Does it take money? Yes. Does it take time? Yes. But we showed through Gunmageddon that in a short period of time, we can collect an awful lot of signatures. We came awfully close. We get 6 times the amount of time to do an initiative than we do to do a referendum. Did you know that? 6 times the amount of time. And so what we could do in 30 days, imagine if we have 180 days to collect signatures and take that statewide. And then as we're collecting signatures, we're building a movement, we're building a database. So we may not even win at the ballot measure, but just getting it qualified, running the drill and having them spend their money to defeat it actually keeps them on defense and we're on offense. And that's what it's going to take. And just like they kept running things and finally got their bills passed, we start running things and eventually we'll get freedom back. Final thing is on candidates. And then the reason why I put them at the last under the initiate is I give up hope on the candidates in this for the large part. I think we're going to get like a third of the legislature to actually agree with us on our issues, and then maybe a sixth of the legislature who will actually have the spine and the willingness to stand up and defend our issues. And Michael, you know what I'm talking about. People who look you in the eye and say, I'm for the Second Amendment. And then you say, can I get you to stand up and do a floor speech? And they say, oh, no, I don't want to. No, I can't do that, but I'm with you on the issue. No. Backbones and brains almost is like the two things that are never seen in the legislature. And so that's what we need. I put that last. We still need to do it. We still need to do scorecards on elected officials. We need to do endorsements so people know who the good ones versus the bad ones are. But man, if we're waiting for Sacramento politicians to wake up and come to us, if you're waiting to elect a majority in Sacramento, you might as well crawl into a time capsule, because I don't think that that's going to happen. We still need to do it, but I think ultimately educate, litigate, initiate, that has to be our path forward for the next 5 years, and see how far it gets us. Other comments on politics? Go ahead. I know we skipped over you.
Yeah, I would just say that my job, litigation, firearms, and civil rights and all that, that should be the last resort. Obviously, there are going to be times where litigation is 100% necessary in order to establish the realms of your rights. But that is quite literally the last-ditch effort that happens. That is the last thing that people do to stop a law, to get a law passed or a law dropped. So when you are thinking about your representatives in the local level, higher up in the state level, that's where it all starts. And I know that Michael with San Diego County Gun Owners, that's his policy, and that's how he sees it. Like, this is something we got to stop putting out the fires. I always say California, we're the best at putting out fires. Litigation is putting out the fire in the sense that we waited till we elected the wrong people. They don't agree with any of the same rights that we agree with. They've pushed their law, they've gotten it past the legislature, and now we have a new law that we now have to fight. We're putting out that fire, and we put out that fire, and we do it pretty well in California. But then another fire occurs, and another, and another, and another. And you're solely playing defense when you're only relying on litigation, and it does take a cooperative, huge, collected effort by everyone, by every single gun organization, and every law firm, everything that's pro-Second Amendment. We actually need to do a much better job in working together in a real effort, such as with this referendum. Imagine if every single gun owners organization and every single gun owner got together, these measures would be defeated pretty easily. So push for that and really put the pressure on us, everyone involved in the industry, to work together on that.
Other comments on the political side?
Yeah, one thing is, litigation isn't activism. It's extremely important, and there are a lot of great lawsuits out there, and there are organizations that are bringing fantastic lawsuits. The NRA, the CRPA, Firearms Policy Coalition, they're funding these lawsuits, and they're extremely important. But the reality is, how many people does that take? It takes an attorney and his staff, right? But that's not really, what can we do in this room once a lawsuit's been filed? Well, by all means, you absolutely have to be a member of all these organizations. I tell people it takes about $300 a year just to be a gun owner in California, and that's all membership fees. You have to join NRA and CRPA. You have to join Gun Owners of California and Gun Owners of America and Firearms Policy Coalition, and by all means, you have to join San Diego County Gun Owners. But that's kind of the minimum requirement. But now what? So you just went online and you signed up for all these memberships, and that took you about a half hour, and that's fantastic. But once that happens, that ship sailed. There's nothing you can do. The type of thing that we need to do, everybody in this room and everybody that you know and the people that didn't show up here today and everybody in San Diego, is get engaged with getting the right people elected. Get engaged with your local politicians, get engaged with your, with people that are running for office, because that's where it really counts. And like Carl said, I've never met a politician who, and I've met a lot of politicians, candidates and people elected, I've never met one that said, I don't support the Second Amendment. Hillary Clinton said she supported the Second Amendment. If you ask Sheriff Gore, he says he supports the Second Amendment.
Yep.
But the reality is, if you get to know them and you're engaged with them, and they realize that, hey, we actually represent a voice that can present consequences because we're that organized and we're that passionate, then things will change. Is it going to change tomorrow? Well, technically, the way our government's set up, we could fix this problem in 2 years. Because the assembly all has to run every 2 years. We could fix this problem in 2 years. Reality is, we're not going to be able to do that. This is the long game, and it's something that should have been going on for decades, but it's going on right now. And that's something that you can truly do. And show up, support candidates, support fantastic elected officials like Amanda Rigby. We had the mayor here today. Carl is a former city councilman for one of the biggest cities in California. these are accessible people. This is where you can truly make a difference and support the right people, support them financially, support them with your time, and that's, getting the right people elected. Is that the answer? Well, I don't think there is the answer. I think that there are a number of things that we need to do, and everybody needs to kind of play their position on the field. And our position locally is to get the right people elected in these city councils, so when they raise up through the ranks, they'll respect our Second Amendment rights. Some of the other folks out there, CRPA and NRA, they play their position in the field, and they do it really well, with litigation and education and lobbying up in Sacramento and that sort of thing. So support them, but then locally, act. And San Diego County gun owners, we're the vehicle. We'll help you act. We'll show you how to do it. So.
Michael, how many people do we have in here?
How many people? Probably about 400 people,
Okay.
350.
400 people. Think about all the people you know in your life. Do you know 20 individuals? How many of you know 20 individuals that you think would support, if you talk to them and explain the issue, would support the Second Amendment? 20 people. 20 people. Can you imagine if everyone in this room went out and recruited 20 people to come to an event with San Diego County gun owners? Just one, as a guest. And if those 20 people said, I'll be part of it, I'll do 1 month of membership. 400 times 20 times what is a 1 month of membership if someone showed up to an event?
I'm sorry.
1 month of membership.
Oh, $10.
$10. That's what, $80,000? $80,000. So what happens at that point? That's 200,000 high propensity voters that Michael can send an endorsement slate to in San Diego County during the next primary. And through micro-targeting, you could probably identify people who support the Second Amendment. Think about that. If you were an organization, you went to each politician and said, I'm going to really ferret out your position on the Second Amendment. Don't just tell me that you're for Second Amendment. We're going to actually give you a letter grade, and that letter grade is going to go on a scorecard, and that scorecard is going to go to all high propensity voters. They would literally wet their pants. They would take his calls. They would be far more cautious about how they voted. You wouldn't have that travesty of what happened to Gunther Guns in Carlsbad. But notice when Gunther Guns was told that they were not welcome in Carlsbad to have a gun range, it was San Diego County gun owners that got collective action rolling, and we were able to force the city of Carlsbad to do the right thing. And now Gunther Guns got their permit, and they're going to be building that range. And so collective action, all it takes is just a little bit of movement, and suddenly the ball starts rolling down the hill, and it gathers momentum. And so don't underestimate how profoundly impactful each and every one of you can be as part of this. But we need a plan. And so, Michael, as our last question in terms of the plan, where do we go from here?
Without someone doing something about it, it's not going to get any better.